I think we'll go ahead and get started. I want to welcome you all to the fourth public lecture in the Great Lives in the Law series sponsored by the Duke Law School Program in Public Law. Today we are extraordinarily fortunate to have as our speaker distinguished lawyer Dennis Archer, formerly the mayor of Detroit and currently the president of the American Bar Association. I'm going to ask in a moment Professor Jim Coleman to introduce Mr. Archer, but first I want to say just a few words about the Duke Program in Public Law and the Great Lives in the Law series that brings Mr. Archer here today. The Program in Public Law was established in 1998 with a gift by an alumnus, Richard Horvitz from Cleveland, and his wife Marcy, in order to foster debate about and increase understanding of the role of law in our democratic system, and particularly the operation of the U.S. Constitution in constraining and enabling government to best serve the people. This program is a fitting focus for our own constitutional and administrative law faculty, each of whom has held at least one significant position in government and has written scholarship addressing the constitutional issues most relevant to the workings of the government and to people's lives. From its beginning, the Program in Public Law has sponsored national conferences, panel debates, brown bag lunches, and many notable speakers. Among its recent projects is a fabulous service on the Program in Public Law website called Supreme Court Online that provides up-to-date, plain English information and commentary on United States Supreme Court cases. Great Lives in the Law is another of the newer initiatives in the Program in Public Law. This series brings to Duke Law School leading lawyers and judges whose careers in public service have been marked by major contributions to the law. The series was inaugurated by Chief Justice Rehnquist in 2002, and it has sponsored the visits and personal stories of Justice Sandra Day O'Connor and civil rights attorney Julius Chambers, and both Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg and Judge Guido Calabrese have agreed to participate in this series in the future. These are all people like Mr. Archer, whose lives in the law are of such significance that knowing about them can expand our understanding of the law and its role in our most important institutions and help to increase respect for law and for our legal system. I now welcome Professor Coleman to introduce our featured guest.
The American Bar Association, with more than 400,000 members, is the largest membership organization in the world. Its influence on the law and the legal profession extends well beyond the borders of this country and reaches into the far corners of the world. Wherever lawyers are facing their responsibilities in a democratic society, they look to the ABA as a model for pursuing justice and defending liberty, as the ABA describes its purpose. But until 1943, the ABA explicitly barred lawyers of color from becoming members of the organization. And another 60 years passed before an African-American lawyer finally was elected president of the association. And that lawyer is our speaker, Dennis Archer, who in August 2003 became the first person of color to serve as president of the American Bar Association. But as those in the ABA know, Dennis Archer's election was no accident. He came to the office with one of the most distinguished careers in law and public service of any of the 125 ABA presidents who preceded him. His election as president of the ABA marked the culmination of a uniquely American journey. He was born in Detroit, raised in a small town in Michigan, where he took his first job at the age of 8 as a caddy for a local golf course. And since 8, he also picked up the game, and at one time was pretty good at it. He claims not to be as good now, but we'll see. He's just trying to get strokes, for those of you who play golf. Although neither of his parents attended college, both prized education and always encouraged him to pursue a college education. In pursuit of that dream, Dennis Archer took a succession of odd jobs as a young man and worked his way through both college and law school. He earned a Bachelor's of Science degree in education from Western Michigan University, after which he taught learning disabled children at 2 Detroit public schools. While teaching full-time during the day, he earned his law degree at the Detroit College of Law, attending classes at night. After graduating from law school, Dennis worked as a trial lawyer and was a partner in several Detroit law firms. He also served as an associate professor at the Detroit College of Law and as an adjunct professor at Wayne State University Law School. His reason for devoting so much energy to the legal profession is simple. In law school, he came to love the law and to see the good that lawyers could do for people and for their communities. And his career has reflected that commitment to public service. In 1985, Governor James Blanchard appointed him an Associate Justice of the Michigan Supreme Court. The following year, he was elected to an 8-year term on the court. And in his final year on the bench, he was named Most Respected Judge in Michigan by Michigan Lawyers Weekly. In the middle of his term on the Michigan Supreme Court, he decided to leave the bench and devote himself to the reconstruction of the city of Detroit. He was elected mayor in 1994 and served 2 successful 4-year terms. During his last term as mayor, he also served as president of the National League of Cities. Newsweek magazine selected him as one of the country's 25 most dynamic mayors. When Dennis stepped down as mayor to pursue the presidency of the ABA, he joined the Detroit-based law firm of Dickinson Wright, among the most prominent law firms in the country. He currently serves as chairman of the 200-lawyer firm. Throughout his career, he has been active in the organized bar. He was president of the Wolverine Bar Association in 1979 to 1980, president of the National Bar Association 1983-1984, and president of the State Bar of Michigan in 1984 and 1985. He is a life member of the Fellows of the American Bar Foundation and the National Bar Association, a fellow of the International Society of Barristers, and a life member of the Sixth Circuit Judicial Conference. He is married and has 2 sons, both of whom are graduates of the University of Michigan. It's my personal honor to welcome to Duke Law School the president of the American Bar Association, Dennis Archer.
Thanks, Jim. 5 strokes aside.
I worked out, so he's the man.
Dean, thank you very much for inviting me here, and Jim for that very warm introduction. And I only need just a couple of strokes aside. Jim is someone that I've known and admired for a long time, and I've watched his work from afar. And so it's always a pleasure to be in his company, and I want to thank Judge Allison Duncan, who is with us today from the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals, and also president of the North Carolina Bar Association, and Judge Robbie Everett, who I've worked with in the ABA, and then there's Kay Webb, who is an ally and friend from the National Bar Association. I appreciate your being here, Kay. And Bert Collins, who is the president and CEO of North Carolina Mutual Life Insurance Company. Bert and I were law school classmates before he left during the middle of our school together at Detroit College of Law. He came down here to North Carolina Mutual to plant his roots and wound up being president and CEO of North Carolina Mutual, and I'm also privileged to serve on that board. So Bert, thank you very much for being here this afternoon. I understand that this is the Great Lives in the Law series, and I know that you've heard in the past from some extraordinary people, many of whom I've had the privilege to meet and to know. Mr. Chief Justice Rehnquist, someone that I've worked with in my capacity as president-elect and then president of the American Bar. Julius Chambers, who also serves, by the way, on the board of directors of North Carolina Mutual. And they have some very great lives in which to share with you. I want to give you a snapshot of my life and how I became a lawyer, and sort of tell you why I believe that being a lawyer is one of the greatest jobs in the world. I stand before you a son of a father who had a 3rd grade education. My dad lost his arm just above his left elbow in a car accident before I was born, and my mother had a high school education. I was born in the city of Detroit, and I grew up in Cassopolis. Cassopolis, Michigan is about 187 miles from Detroit. It's near the Indiana border. Indeed, South Bend, Indiana, Notre Dame is only 24 miles away. Population was 1,500. I've been in more high schools since then that had more people in high school that lived in our village. As was mentioned by Jim, it was made very clear to me early on by my parents that education would be the one thing that would allow me to live up to whatever my potential might be. When I moved from Detroit at the age of 5, I was not happy to, but could always go take a bath or a shower, etc. In Cassopolis, we had no running water, and so I took a bath every Saturday night in a metal tub. We had no running water. You can also make the next connection. We did not have any indoor plumbing, and therefore we had an outhouse and the like. And my dad, because he was handicapped and he had a third-grade education, and we did not have Americans with Disability Act and those kind of things available then. My dad worked for a gentleman who owned a tool and die shop in South Bend, Indiana, and had a summer home in Cassopolis that my dad took care of. My dad made $37.50 every 2 weeks for 6 months of the year, and $75 every 2 weeks the other 6 months of the year. And from time to time, though I didn't know what it was, my dad said he was going down to the Department of Social Services because we needed to make ends meet. But I knew growing up that if I wanted to buy something and if I didn't have money for it, I needed to save up for it. And so I went to work at the age of 8 as a caddy on a golf course. I set pins in a bowling alley before it closed down and did a number of odd jobs and worked my way through high school. My parents told me, get a good education, you're going to go to college. But they couldn't tell me what I should do in college. So I chose the profession of pharmacy. It didn't take long for me and pharmacy not to get along together. So I ultimately went up to Western Michigan University in Kalamazoo, Michigan, where I finally met a counselor that sat down with me and talked about what it is that I'd like to do. And I wound up getting into education, specifically to teach educable mentally retarded students. Today they're referred to as learning disabled students. I started out in Detroit public schools, and I really enjoyed myself. I loved being in the classroom with kids. I'd leave the school at night, go back home, change out of a suit and tie or jacket and tie, put on some jeans or some slacks, go back over to the school where I taught in the area. I might get involved if it was during the springtime in some pickup softball games with some of the kids, or I'd stop by the homes of some of my kids to find out what their parents were doing with them, maybe making some suggestions. And so the principal thought that I got along so well not only with my colleagues as teachers but with young people that she thought I'd make a good principal and said, why don't you get your master's degree, because that's the step you have to take if you want to become a principal. So I said fine. So I enrolled in the University of Michigan extension course. It was taught in Detroit. And the first 2 classes I took used the same textbooks that I had at Western Michigan University. Well, I looked at it and said, well, okay, same textbooks, but I'm sure there's going to be something different that's offered. There was nothing different that was offered, and it turns out I was dating a teacher that I'd met at the school, and I started sharing my frustrations about it, and she said, why don't you go to law school? I said, I don't know anything about the law. I've never met a lawyer. I don't know what a lawyer does or anything. So why don't you go to law school? I said, no, I don't think I don't know anything about it. She kept at it. So I took this thing called the LSAT. First year they offered it. It suggested that if I went to law school, I'd be successful. So I enrolled in law school. I will tell you something. I fell in love with the law. I began to appreciate what the law could do and what a lawyer could do on behalf of his or her clients. I also found that I needed to fall in love with Black's Dictionary. every paragraph I read when I was starting out, there was words and phrases I'd never heard of, and so me and blacks, we're getting along quite well. Fee simple, what the heck is fee? And I'm going through all of that. But fell in love with the law and also did the brightest thing that I could ever do. I married the woman who suggested I go to law school. I became a lawyer, and I went to law school at night. I taught school during the day. I will tell you something. The thing that I thought about a lot was this thing called the bar exam. I knew I was going to have to take it in order to have the privilege to become a lawyer. And when I was studying for the bar exam, and I was scared to death, I was studying anywhere between 12 and 14 hours a day, 7 days a week. I promised God and a whole lot of responsible people, if you let me get by this exam. And I couldn't understand why. I mean, I graduated from an American Bar Association accredited law school, Detroit College of Law. So why do I have to take this thing called the bar exam? But after I passed it, I said, well, we do need to have something to rule out these other folks. What I also discovered as I went through law school was the power of this thing called a bar association. The Wolverine Bar Association, of which Jim alluded to, that I became president of ultimately, it was a group of black lawyers, men and women, who cared deeply about their profession, who wanted to stay at the cutting edge of their profession, who wanted to learn more about their practice and have these things called continuing legal education programs. I thought if you got a law school, you didn't have to worry about anything like that, but of course I learned differently. And so we started a Wolverine Bar Association law student division. Then I met a professor who started out, or I got very close to a professor. He started teaching at the time that I started law school. And he said, Dennis, you are going to, when you graduate, get involved with the black bar. Don Campbell was his name, happened to be white. He said, I urge you not only to participate in the work of the black bar, but I urge you to get involved in the Bar Association, Detroit Bar, State Bar of Michigan, and also the American Bar. Well, I was already a member of the American Bar Law Student Division because I wanted to find out what was going on in our profession. And so I got involved in bar associations, as Jim pointed out, as president of the Wolverine Bar, the National Bar. By the way, the National Bar Association was founded in 1924 and incorporated in 1925 in Des Moines, Iowa. Why? Because black lawyers could not join the American Bar Association, and we wanted to make sure that we stayed at the cutting edge of our profession. And so we came together nationally. I mean, I wasn't there in 1924 or 25, but I'm just talking about what was passed down. And so I stayed active in the bar, became president of the National Bar, president of the State Bar of Michigan. And all throughout my legal training, all throughout my travels around the country doing bar association work, I've met so many outstanding lawyers of color who were not able to be members of the ABA when they were in their prime. Lawyers like, or I should say, start with Mr. Justice Thurgood Marshall and others who were just outstanding lawyers of color. And I think about what America would be like and what our profession would be like if the likes of William Hastie, Charles Hamilton Houston, Constance Baker Motley, Damon Keith, Thurgood Marshall, and so many other giants had been permitted to be young lawyers in the American Bar Association and engage in the great debates and then become active in the House of Delegates. How much further America could have been in the issue of race had they been permitted to participate in that discussion. In 1971, I went to my first annual meeting of the American Bar, or the National Bar Association. There, interestingly enough, I met a lawyer that I'd never heard of before by the name of Chesterfield Smith. He was from Florida. He was president or president-elect of the American Bar Association. He came to the National Bar and said, we've had enough. We've been wrong. We want you all to come to get involved in the American Bar Association, and we've set up a seat in our House of Delegates, our final policy-making body, for a representative of the National Bar. The president at that time was a lawyer from Michigan by the name of Ed Bell. So 1972, he goes to the annual meeting. I go to the annual meeting to get involved in the American Bar Association Young Lawyers section, as it was called then. I was drawn to the American Bar for two reasons. First, because the American Bar had invited the National Bar to participate, and second, because of a young lawyer by the name of Harry Hathaway, who was the incoming president of the Young Lawyers section. He wanted to make a statement about inclusion. So he had John Kersel, who was a lawyer I knew in Detroit, who came to me and said, Harry will appoint you to a committee if you'll come out. Harry wants to make sure that everybody knows that the Young Lawyers section is available and open to everybody. And so I went out. There was a second milestone in 1983 in the American Bar when William Reese Smith, now a past president of the American Bar, but he was president at that time, and Jane Barrett, who was the chair of the Young Lawyers section, they invited a number of young lawyers from around, a number of lawyers of color from around the United States to meet in Washington, D.C. National Conference of Black Lawyers, National Bar Association, Asian American, Hispanic, and Native American lawyers. They wanted to find out what were the realities or what was the reasons why lawyers of color were not participating in the American Bar. And they got an earful. Following that earful, the House of Delegates, or I should say the Board of Governors of the American Bar, appointed this task force, and I believe it was headed up by Cal Udall from Arizona, to look into the myths and the realities of what was holding back lawyers of color. The interesting thing is that at that time, in about 1983, if you go back and take a look at and do your Nexus search, the National Law Journal did not have a pretty picture about the practice of law for lawyers of color. They took a look at the largest law firms in the United States, and we were hardly anywhere to be found. They might have 400 lawyers in their law firm, and there might be one person who was a partner, might have one or two associates who were lawyers of color. You didn't find us as tenured track professors in law schools. You didn't find us as deans of law schools unless the law schools were historically black colleges. You didn't find us as law clerks unless you found a judge or a justice of color. That's when you saw a law clerk of color. You didn't find us hardly anywhere on the landscape. And that's what we shared with the American Bar Association. The American Bar Association then created Goal 9, which is a priority in terms of where it spends its money. It wanted to include opportunities for women and for ethnic minorities. They created this thing called the Commission on Opportunities for Minorities in the Profession. I was its first chair in 1986. We then followed 1988 with a Minority Council demonstration program that really broke down and changed the legal environment of America. And what I mean by that is that corporations began to take an active approach in our profession. I should point out that there was an issue when this task force was first formed in about 1984 or so. At the time, white women were considered to be minorities. And so the issue that we had to deal with was, as a task force, do we take on the issues involving women as well as ethnic minorities, and felt that because we were so disproportionately missing, we were not even close to anything in terms of being present as members of the profession in terms of sheer numbers, that we decided to deal with the issue of ethnic minorities. But we recommended to the board that they create a commission or task force on women. The end result was 86 when they created an opportunities for minorities. In 1987, they created an opportunities for women in the profession. Its first chair was the First Lady of Arkansas, Hillary Rodham Clinton. She and I went around the country together. She was knocking out glass ceilings, and I was trying to open up the door for ethnic minority lawyers. Well, that's a lot of history. And I will tell you that I'm proud to be the first lawyer of color as president of the American Bar Association in our 127-year existence. But to me personally, because of my own personal philosophical beliefs in terms of always bringing somebody behind me, I am more proud that Robert Gray is the president-elect of the American Bar Association. Robert Gray is a partner in Hunton and Williams. He's from Richmond, Virginia, and he's African American. So what the American Bar Association has done is to say to all lawyers, irrespective of race, gender, etc., we are available and open for your leadership if you're willing to come in and earn the right to get there. So we have started a new chapter. You should know that I love being a lawyer. I not only enjoy practicing, but also using my skills and knowledge and the power as a lawyer toward public service. Lawyers have a long history as public servants and public officials and have made great contributions to the world that we live in today. If you think about it, lawyer Thomas Jefferson changed history when he drafted the Declaration of Independence that set the course for this country that we adhere to and follow today. Lawyer John Adams ensured that states' rights and liberties would be included in that document and in the United States Constitution. Lawyer Abraham Lincoln changed history when he made a stand for abolishing slavery. Whether it's lawyers like John Foster Dulles or William Fulbright who made imprints on our foreign affairs and international politics and exchange, or our labor and union lawyers who won victories for workers in this country, or lawyers who just work every day, unrecognized or unheralded as they help those in society who need it most. Lawyers have power. The power to challenge injustice, to change society, to help those in need, and to make lasting contributions to the betterment of our communities and to the world. I believe also that lawyers have the power to heal. Lawyers are, in many respects, healers. Like physicians and clergy, we take an oath that includes faithfully representing clients, maintaining their confidences, preserving as inviolate their communication, undertaking representation of the oppressed and the defenseless, the disempowered and the just cause without regard for considerations personal to ourselves, and we all uphold the rule of law. Indeed, lawyers have the power to heal the wounds of injustice, to right the wrongs, and to ensure that they never happen again. Lawyers often help people when they are at their most vulnerable point, or most trouble, or in crisis. It is in those times of pain and need that clients need us the most. We can be counselors, advisors, problem solvers, and even peacemakers. As stated in our oath, among our many tasks is the obligation to serve the poor and the defenseless, to defend them against those who would exploit or even destroy them, whether we do it free of charge or for a minimal fee. Like the clergy, we take an oath to work on behalf of those who cannot afford our services. It is therefore logical to view lawyers as public servants. Romans 13:4 refers to one who upholds the law as the minister of God to thee for good, as well as a revenger to execute wrath upon him that doeth evil. I believe personally that lawyer is a calling to serve the public. And I don't hesitate to use calling in a religious sense because I believe that lawyers are ministers of justice in the same context as the scripture from Romans. On an individual level, if we approach our life's work as healers, if we reorientate our thinking to take advantage of the power of healing, we can do much good for our clients and for others. The mere presence of a lawyer can bring comfort and solace to a person in need of help, knowing that we can positively affect change in what otherwise might be a difficult adversarial situation. Lawyers as healers can promote a model that emphasizes the greater good. Lawyer by training Mahatma Gandhi suggested that the true function of a lawyer was to unite parties riven asunder. His healing power was such that he was able to peacefully overcome the might of a well-armed British militia and lead his country toward independence. Lawyer Franklin Roosevelt healed the nation by bringing faith and hope at a time when we needed it the most. His New Deal put the unemployed back to work, boosted business and agriculture to get Wall Street back on its feet, and developed a social safety net of assistance to those who needed it. He made tough choices politically, but he knew that the greater good would be served by taking care of people. Lawyer Thurgood Marshall, and one of my greatest inspirations, helped heal a nation suffering from a legacy of slavery and racial bias. He attacked policies and procedures that were unfair and wrong and usually won. He won 39 out of 32 cases that he argued before the United States Supreme Court. His most memorable victory is Brown versus the Board of Education. It is thought by many to be among the most important legal cases of that century, and his work as the first Supreme Court Justice of color exemplified his belief that there was a lot more that could be done to advance opportunity for people who had been locked out of the system. His goal was to open doors. He used his power as a lawyer to do that, to remedy injustice in a way that extended opportunities for generations to come. Marshall was a healer of pain in our society. Closer to home, your very own Dean Coleman puts in his healing powers to work in many ways. One way as chair of the ABA Death Penalty Moratorium Implementation Project. In 1997, the ABA adopted a death penalty moratorium resolution that, while taking no position on capital punishment per se, called upon each capital jurisdiction to impose a moratorium on executions. A moratorium would remain in effect until policies and procedures were implemented to ensure that the death penalty cases were administered fairly and impartially in accordance with due process, and to minimize the risk that innocent people may be executed. To help implement the resolution, the American Bar Association established the Moratorium Project and asked Jim to lead it. The project encourages other bar associations to press for moratoriums in their jurisdictions and to encourage state leaders to institute moratoriums and undertake detailed examinations of capital punishment laws and processes in their jurisdictions. If there was a wound in the American justice system, the death penalty system is ailing. It is up to lawyers to heal it. So you see, lawyers heal in many ways, and many of you will do it every day. You will stand up to represent those accused of the worst of crimes, those who may be sentenced to death and may be on appeal. You will give voice to those who have no resources, who are too young, too ill, or too poor to defend themselves. You will help families, business partners, and corporations resolve their differences and find solutions to their problems. You will defend the rights of even those who are most reviled in society. And you will do so sometimes against your own self-interest. But in doing so, you will heal the community. You will bring justice and resolutions to issues that seem to be so incredibly unjust and so irresolvable. You will heal by bringing the power of your words, your knowledge, your compassion to bear on the cases to be resolved. While many will denigrate our profession, without lawyers providing our time and expertise, most often free of charge, much good and much healing in this world would never be accomplished. We are the ultimate volunteers and public servants of our society. There's not a chamber of commerce, a battered women's shelter, a symphony orchestra, a boys and girls club, a church, a synagogue, a nonprofit board in this community that does not have lawyers from the community intimately involved. So I want to encourage all of you to become more actively involved. If you're not already in a public service initiative that helps support and increases equity and justice where you may live, it will not only enrich your legal experience, but offer you a sense of fulfillment and greater purpose. A great way to do that is become active in your state or local bar association and in the American Bar Association. The American Bar has a great role in speaking out on behalf of lawyers nationwide and internationally, in promoting rule of law issues wherever possible. For example, our experience with Afghanistan and Iraq makes it painfully clear that the rule of law, or its absence, in the world is very much a concern of America and for American law. For this reason, the American Bar Association has undertaken extensive work in advancing the rule of law in many areas around the world. The American Bar Association's largest rule of law project, the Central and East European Law Initiative, known as CELI, since its founding in 1991, has sent over 5,000 judges, lawyers, and law professors and contributed over $125 million to that region. These volunteers promote judicial independence, advise in drafting and implementing modern criminal justice legislation. They assist in the development of commercial and environmental law and support legal education and legal profession reform, among other things. In the rest of the world, the American Bar Association Initiative Councils for Latin America, Asia, and Africa provide similar assistance in legal reforms and promote the rule of law throughout their respective areas. Another successful project is the American Bar Association UN Development Project Legal Resources Unit. It recruits pro bono legal experts to help reform legal systems, support electoral bodies, strengthen anti-corruption measures, and much more in countries like Pakistan, Rwanda, Vietnam, and Serbia. The International Legal Exchange Program arranges an annual briefing trip for American legal professionals to exchange ideas with legal professionals in other countries. Countries visited include Spain and Morocco, Brazil, Lebanon, Syria and Iran, Costa Rica. In addition, select ABA leaders spend a day of briefings at the United Nations with the U.S. mission to the UN. These activities allow us to do our healing beyond our borders and help build democracies and to build justice to those, bring justice to those who do not have it. Finally, I want to leave you with this thought. You will be faced with many responsibilities and obligations throughout your careers, but don't let them weigh you down. Take care of yourselves and your families and friends. Take time in the morning for that run or walk or exercise. Make sure that you enjoy a family dinner. In connecting with your communities and the world, don't forget to connect with yourself and your loved ones. A lawyer with a balanced life makes for a better lawyer, healer, and a whole human being. It won't be easy, but none of you took this path because it was easy. But I am here to tell you that it can be done. Sometimes we get caught up in the practice of law, especially when we first start out. And we spend a lot of hours in the office, and we take a lot of work home. And our family wants us to interact with them, wants us to be home for dinner, wants us to go for a sporting event, wants us to be with our children at something in school. Don't get caught up in saying, I'm too busy, I can't do that. It is important to stay connected and grounded. I can tell you this, that a caddy who devoted his career to the law and public service has never, ever lost my devotion to golf. I still want 3 socks aside. Thurgood Marshall once said that the legal system can force open doors and sometimes even knock down walls, but it cannot build bridges. That job belongs to you and me. Thank you. Now, how much time do we have to answer questions? I'd be delighted to answer any questions that anybody may have on any issue for the next 10 minutes, at which time the dean said she's got this thing, she'll yank my neck, and I don't feel like getting my neck out of shape. So the last question, Dean, you'll have to choose the person who asked the last question. I'm not going to do that. But questions. Dean, I thought you said you had an inquisitive question. What is wrong with these folks? Yes. Bert?
Could you tell us about your wife and her career and how she got involved?
Well, my wife, who suggested that I go to law school after our second son was born, and in preschool, went back to law school herself, or went to law school. She graduated. She went full-time, passed the bar, became an assistant corporation counsel for the city of Detroit, then was asked to go back to the law school that we both graduated from, and she became assistant dean of student affairs, and the same governor who appointed me to the Michigan Supreme Court in 1985 appointed her to the district court in 1989, where she's been a judge of the 36th District Court for some 14 plus years. She is still the CEO of the household. Yes?
You spoke some about your career as a teacher prior to becoming a lawyer. I'm wondering how your experiences in that informed your later decisions in the practice of law.
I was also fortunate to be able to teach at the Detroit College of Law, where I taught evidence, and I taught at Wayne State University School of Law. A team taught with a classmate of mine, Ed Littlejohn, and we taught medical malpractice together. Teaching requires that one be prepared, whether it's to teach young children or brilliant students like yourself. And one of the things that I've always learned is that it is always best to be prepared. I would rather be over-prepared and be able to successfully represent my client. And being prepared, and really being prepared, allows you on those rare occasions when you find somebody on the other side who is so ill-prepared that you can't be overly prepared before a jury, because you don't want the jury to feel sorry for somebody who is really not prepared. So it allows you some flexibility. And so from that perspective, it has helped me a great deal. Being on the Michigan Supreme Court cured me from jumping to conclusions. Oftentimes we'd read great briefs that would cause the court to agree to hear a case because we are clear we're going to reverse it. We hear the arguments. We walk out or walk into chambers, and on our last day, we'd have 3 days of oral arguments. On the last day, we would poll each other and figure out who, where we were coming down on. We'd agree, yep, we're going to reverse it. It's assigned to somebody. Somebody could be me. It's one thing about reading the briefs about the law. It's another one to research the law. And on many occasions, we have found ourselves affirming as opposed to reversing. Because in the quiet of research and writing, you find that what you thought you were going to do was not appropriate because the law didn't support it. And it also taught me to listen well. That served me very well as mayor when I was going around and having town hall meetings. Sometimes people would ask, don't you get offended when people stand, why don't you pick up the garbage and why don't you so-and-so, whatever it was? And I said, no. And said, well, why is that? I said, because if somebody cares enough about their city to stand up and to say that they passionately care, I would rather have them to do that than to stop caring about their city and not saying anything at all and maybe walking away. So listening is important. Yes?
Does the ABA have any plans to get involved in the reconstruction of the legal system in Iraq or Afghanistan?
We are prepared to go in and to participate after the conflict is over, which it's clearly not. We do not, as an association, go in until there is a desire by that country for us to come in. We don't want to be seen as coming in while the conflict is still going on, because then we are not seen as folks to come in to help heal or to do the bidding that they want. We're not coming in to tell somebody this is what you ought to do, but rather we're going in and say, here's what we have back home, here's what works for us, what would you like work for you, and then work with them to develop the kind of democracy that will work for them, their religious beliefs, their culture, and things of that nature. And that's when we are at our best, and we've done it all over Central Europe. You all must be ready to, yes.
I have a question as a Detroiter. Every time I go back home, I see a lot of the blighted areas being redeveloped, a lot of the industry coming back to the city, CompuWare, GM. But yet, away from Detroit, the image can sometimes be less than positive. What do you think is the key to Detroit's progress?
More continued hard work. The city of Detroit has had an image, in my view, nationally and internationally, that it does not deserve. But I will also tell you that the city of Detroit experienced more disinvestment than any other large city in the United States. Our city was the first city to experience, excuse me, malls. The first mall was Northland. And Northland malls are not unlike anything that you see today, the most modern mall at that time. You could go, you could park your car, you could park free as opposed to parking downtown and paying. You could go shop till you drop, you could have a place to eat, you could go to different stores and walk in, walk out. And the city's response at the time was to increase parking rates and to do other things that were just plain stupid as opposed to fighting it in the ways that, you know, you can become real competitive. So the malls built Northland, Eastland, Westland, Southland, Fairlane, and others. And by the time I became mayor in 1994, and it happened, frankly, about 1985, we did not have one department store in the city of Detroit. We said, I'll meet you downtown, but there was no downtown. We're in the process of building a downtown. Jobs left the community. I mean, hundreds of thousands of jobs left the city of Detroit. Nobody wanted to come back downtown. Everybody wanted to be outside. For those of us who live inside the city of Detroit, we might spend $3 billion of our discretionary money inside the city, but we spent about $8 or $9 billion outside the city. We couldn't buy appliances and the things that we needed. I left the Michigan Supreme Court after a lot of thought. I really enjoyed being on the Michigan Supreme Court. I worked with 6 other colleagues. The collegiality was outstanding. It was a position that I could have stayed in as long as I didn't do something stupid for, you know, until I decided to retire. But I felt a calling, and I don't mean that in a silly sense, but I really felt that I could make a difference. As a member of the Michigan Supreme Court, I was representing 9.3 million people, but I thought if I could do something, if I could just make the difference in the city of Detroit, we had just over 1 million people in the city at that time, that perhaps I could make a serious contribution to the state. So I resigned, and I went to work to see if we couldn't find solutions to the problems. I found what I thought were solutions to the problems of the city of Detroit, published a document called Thoughts for a Greater Detroit, sent it out to over 1,000 people, including the current mayor, see whether or not there might be some changes that might be made. Because after I left the Michigan Supreme Court, went back to making some money, I thought, you know, it's not all bad. I mean, I figured that's so, but nobody stepped up. So I said, I'm going to run. So I announced my candidacy in 1992, and won in November of 93. And we reduced crime in the city. Every year, crime was reduced in the city. We took a junk bond status, had a 8, 9, 10, 11 upgrades. I had an A rating, I think A minus in Fitch, A minus in Moody's, and a Baa1 from Moody's. Fitch and Standard & Poor's are A minus. We created thousands of new jobs. We won the Empowerment Zone designation. Did a lot of different kind of things. We got on the issue of casino gaming. There's a statewide election. Folks generally frowned upon the city of Detroit, even within the state. But they gave us the privilege of having up to 3 privately owned casinos. Not on the water, land-based. It passed by just over 50%. We've got 3 land-based casinos. Temporary, right now the temporary casinos throws off about $103 million to the city's general fund. We've got about 8,000 employees who are working the temporaries. And when the permanents are built, they'll throw off about $250 million. We've got 2 stadiums side by side downtown. We got new housing all across the city. We've got the 2004, since you know Detroit well, Ryder Cup coming to Oakland Hills in Oakland County. 2005, we got the All-Star Game in downtown city Detroit at Comerica Park. 2006, we've got the Super Bowl. The NFL gave us a Super Bowl even before Ford Field was finished. 2008, we have the regional NCAA basketball championship. In 2009, we got the Final Four. So we're doing a lot. CompuWare's coming to downtown, where they are downtown. A lot of new businesses and the like. It just goes to show you in some respect that you never know what any one of you might be doing when you leave this great law school. You're going to be well prepared. You never know what might be out there for you. But one thing is absolutely clear. Unless you are ethical and practice good ethical habits, unless you connect and bond to your community and show them the respect that they deserve, and you practice good law, and you are always respectful of your fellow attorneys with whom you practice, you never know what life may come and offer you. But you've got to be prepared. You're getting the best education that you can find anywhere. We've got 1,050,000 licensed lawyers in the United States. 750,000 of us practice law. The overwhelming number of lawyers who practice law in the United States are sole practitioners. Lawyers who practice by themselves with a legal secretary, paralegal maybe, and if they happen to be in a town that has a law school, they may have a law clerk. The overwhelming number of lawyers who practice in law firms in America practice in law firms the sizes of 2 to 10. And those of us who practice in law schools of 50 or more, in firms of 50 or more, represent about this much of the practice of law. The opportunities are unlimited. Whether you graduate the top of your class, order the course, or you graduate thank you Lordy, you still have to pass the bar. You still have to pass the bar. And if you pass the bar, whether you start at the top because you'll have more opportunities because your grades will allow you to do that, or you graduate thank you Lordy, if you work hard, if the top order the coif starts wherever he or she works and they become complacent, I'll take that thank you Lordy graduate and I'll surpass the one who graduated top of his or her class. It'll take her long or him longer to do it, but there's an opportunity to succeed. It all depends upon you. Be proud of being a lawyer. Don't let anybody denigrate our profession. Don't let anybody knock us. Be proud of who you are because we do good work. Finally, you tell me the last time you've ever driven down a street in your hometowns and seen on a barbershop, beauty shop, podiatrist office, etc. If you're poor and can't afford to get your feet fixed, hair cut, hair done, etc., come in on Fridays from 3 to 5 and we'll do it free. Lawyers are the only one who will step up to the plate to represent the oppressed and defenseless. Be proud to be a lawyer. Thank you.
Thank you, Dennis. My